Great. So, welcome to Clay and Conversations here at the Clay Studio. I am Jennifer Zwilling. I'm the curator and director of artistic programs, and I'm very excited to have Jennifer Ling Datchuk here with us live from Phoenix, Arizona. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Happy November 20th, everyone.
Happy November 20th. Is that a date that I should know something about?
No, it just means the year's over.
Okay, great. We're getting there. Well, as many of you may know, we have Clay as Care up in our galleries, and Jennifer has really amazing works of art in that show. And we have been working together I really need to look back at my email, but I think it's been nearly 3 years since we first invited
Mhm.
you to be part of it. And we had an amazing symposium where Jennifer presented. We have the works in the gallery. We're just pitching ourselves about how great the show is and how privileged we are to have the work here. So if you are in Philadelphia, I hope you're going to come and see it in person. If you haven't already, you can go to our website to learn more and to see the recording of the symposium. And today we're going to talk about a little bit about the exhibition, but lots of other things as well. So I'm going to start today by saying that we recognize that the Clay Studio stands on the indigenous territory known as Lenapehoking, the traditional homelands of the Lenni Lenape people. We would like to take a moment to reflect on the role of the Lenape as the past, present, and future stewards of the land, and the role of all of us to join in their tradition of respect and caring for the land and each other. Great. Well, I'm going to introduce Jennifer. Jennifer Ling Datchuk is an artist born in Warren, Ohio, and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Her work is an exploration of her layered identity as a woman, a Chinese woman, as an American, as a third culture kid. Datchuk holds an MFA in artisanry from the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth and a BFA in crafts from Kent State University. She's received grants from the Artist Foundation of San Antonio, travel grant from Art Pace and Linda Leighton International Artist Exchange Program to research the global migrations of porcelain and blue and white pattern decoration. She was awarded a residency through the Blue Star Contemporary Art Museum to conduct her studio practice at the Künstlerhaus Bethanien in Berlin, Germany, and has participated in residencies at the Pottery Workshop in Jingdezhen, China, Vermont Studio Center, European Ceramic Work Center in the Netherlands, Art Pace, Arts Industry Residency at the John Michael Kohler Art Center in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. In 2017, she received the Emerging Voices Award from the American Craft Council, and in 2020, she was named a United States Artist Fellow in Craft. Her work is in the permanent collections at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, San Antonio Museum of Art, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Ogden Museum of Southern Art, Pacific Asia Museum, Blanton Museum of Art, and the CC Foundation in Shanghai, China. She is an assistant professor of art in the ceramics department at Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona, and lives and maintains a studio practice in Phoenix. Jennifer, would you like to share with us how and
Yeah.
why you made the brave decision to make your life in art?
Um, Thank you, Jennifer, for that introduction and for that question, which it feels so monumental in how to answer that. I feel like it's not like one thing, it's many steps, but I think very much like every dutiful Asian daughter, I thought you should be a doctor or lawyer. And it really was something I still think about was I was always a really creative child and like just thinking about how to nurture that within my own child. And I really think about the objects I was surrounded with my whole life growing up. And I love this image of me at my birthday party when I was 2 years old because it captures this china cabinet that we had everywhere we moved throughout the Northeast, from like New York City to Florida to Kentucky to Ohio multiple times. This china cabinet came with us. And inside of it was always these perfectly placed porcelain objects that were supposed to symbolize and represent luck and good fortune. And I kind of think in some ways this was like my fascination of like functional objects, decorative objects kind of was born. And I think really what helped me make that brave decision to stop studying pre-law in school. I was studying chemistry to do pre-med, but then I failed it so miserably, like so embarrassingly. Like I remember getting a -3 on a chemistry test, and it was on a curve. And I remember our class of like 15 got whittled down to two. And so I was like, okay. So sometimes the decisions make themselves. That was an easy way to step back. But I remember taking pre-law classes and having to take that required art class. And I really saw like my world flip, and I started seeing the world in color where everything in law was black and white. And it really made me think about like growing up with this sense of immigrant ingenuity. Like I would watch my grandfather cut the electrical cords off of broken appliances and weave a net to grow gourds. My grandmother sewed clothes. She brought home piecework from the sewing factory. And I lived with all these people making to make do and to make nice. And then I think part of that like contributed to this china cabinet of objects. And I tell this story often, but it wasn't until later in life when I finally got to open that cabinet because we were forbidden to touch it. That plate in the background was plastic. And I think about that so much of like how the the decorations on this porcelain plate translated into this plastic material. And so, is the worth in the material or the design and the decorateness of it? And so, I think about that all the time when I'm thinking about my work. And a lot of times, I kind of pull from the private, the personal, and I make it public and I think is very much political. So I've traveled back and forth to Jindijin, China a few times. It's the birthplace of porcelain in the world. And my Chinese family is from Guangzhou, China, which is the major port in which the porcelain objects in Jindijin traveled. So part of me thinks that it's somewhere deep in my DNA that um, my genetics have traveled this road in some way. And I love that I find these objects that I grew up with. So the Buddha was in that china cabinet, and I was taught to revere it, often given as a gift on to a newly married couple, and hope that their future household is blessed with many sons. I met a Buddha factory that made these really beautiful articulated Buddhas with teeth and smiles and eyes. And I asked if I can use their form and sculpt little girl hairstyles on the what is typically boys crawling all over Buddha. And the reason why he has a grin on his face is because he's unbothered by all the little babies crawling on him, pinching his belly button, his nipple, tugging on his ears. And I think there's something so kind of joyful about this, but to really think about how girls hold up half the sky, and that I wanted to kind of think about recentering gender in these works where growing up in such a patriarchal culture. And so this is where my Buddhist series was born. Um, I still yeah, first met this Buddha factory in 2016, and last summer they're still making them, although their business has scaled down very much. And I still share with them the story of this, and I think it's really lovely as everyone thinks a man runs the factory, but it was his wife.
Hmm.
And so I even thinking about things that are often treated as discarded or broken. I love blue and white shards. Each one is hand painted and tells a story. These are the bottom of the inside of bowls, just cleaned up a little to make them like more sellable or presentable to these ghost markets, which I love that they're called ghost markets because they're antique markets, and I really do believe objects haunt our lives and that they keep digging these up, and that I love the idea that these are priceless because they're hundreds of years old, but because they're broken, they can also be seen as worthless too. And so, how this all comes together, and this is also part of like the personal story of my work and thinking about clay as care as an exhibition, is when Jennifer proposed it to me like 3 years ago, and like thinking about how I really think about my body in relation to porcelain, the fragile, the resilience of it, the whiteness of it, the desire for it, the fetishization of it as a material. and like really how I use it to tell stories of like my like decade-long journey with endometriosis and just trying to seek care for the pain I was experiencing before it even became part of our like common everyday conversations. I love that I'm meeting menopause at a moment where menopause is in everybody's conversation. It's on so many commercials and articles. I am like well read now because it's like thrown at me. But this experience really kind of set off a part of my practice that I I would share, but not so public, and I never really centered it as a point of my work. So I think this is where Jennifer's idea really kind of made me think about even how I tell this story. In 2016, I was in a residency in Berlin, Germany. My cousins who were traveling the world for a year decided to come through, and then they were going to Poland on their next stop. And so I tagged along on their trip. I woke up in extreme pain one day through a series of like really unfortunate events where I was too cheap to pay for a cell phone plan because it was 2016. Um, and I didn't have a SIM card, and using Wi-Fi to try and call a cab, an ambulance, I could barely walk. And after spending 8 hours in an emergency room and going in for exploratory surgery, I had a ruptured ovarian cyst, an ovarian torsion, and the first time I heard the words, you have endometriosis. I spent 5 days in the hospital, care that I would have never received here in the US, but it is often hard to diagnose a ruptured cyst. And then I had all these experiences in this hospital where my roommate next to me died while I was watching Titanic on TV. I became best friends with my roommate Maria, who was afraid to speak English to me because she felt like it wasn't good, but she was amazing. She gave me a robe, she gave me slippers. And every morning when the doctor and nurses would do their rounds, I'd hear them speak in Polish, like, oh, the Americano, that's Koreano, Japanese, we don't know what she is. And so even in that moment where I was in this dreary university hospital, I found aspects of my practice coming out. And that in this like weird twist of fate, I was by day 4 just like begging to go home. My roommate controlled the remote control and she was flipping through channels. And here she was on this like news clickbait television series, like an Inside Edition. And here my friend Gary Sweeney from San Antonio came onto the screen, and it was about one of his projects where he covered his family home in photographs. And I felt like in some way this was the universe telling me you're going to be okay. And I love Gary. He's an elder artist. He's everyone's always surprised how we're friends. And I really love that even Maria, my roommate, turned down the volume because she was tired of hearing Gary talk about himself. It is a joke that we have with each other. He's done TED Talks about this project, and I really love how it made me feel okay. And then from that, like I really thought about this surgery I had on top of like two more surgeries I've had to kind of um, manage my endometriosis. I think about all the scars on my body and how my abdomen became a site of pain, but also a site of potential and possibilities. That I think about how we live in silence. Women so often live in silence and our pain isn't acknowledged, and how we really are one tough bitch because of how we have to keep showing up for ourselves, keep advocating. And that I think so much of what we talk about resides in a silent sisterhood, and that we privately confide, we don't publicly share. And I think this experience just has made me like I talk about it so much that it's honestly, I lose so many Instagram followers because I also think people are afraid to acknowledge that we have a right to receive care for the pain in our bodies. And so these are blue and white shards that are cast to fit along the curves of my body. These don't, it doesn't look like it much, but they're all perfectly fit. So they sit in each divot of these kind of scars that have healed in really weird ways, and that broken teacup handle kind of by the ovary, which feels like that gentle tugging you would feel every month. And really, I wanted to find beauty in the broken. And like so much of what I make now all kind of really talks about the timeline within our own bodies, how I really think about so much of women's bodies are navigated by waiting and time. From the time between ovulation and menstruation, from pregnancy to not being pregnant, to the phases of the moon and how full moons really tug at the water in our bodies. Like our bodies contain worlds, and I love that so much. We are a whole solar system. And so I think about too how going through this and like shuffling around doctors and how I really turned to acupuncture and Eastern medicine to kind of help me balance what I was not receiving. And like a lot of people use Eastern philosophy and treatments to like navigate the system. And so 2 week wait is like my version of an altar in which every day I would light a candle in hopes that that like this pregnancy test would be positive. And I love in this meeting that Michael Forrester is here, who was my studio assistant in San Antonio, who helped me make this. And really too, my wonderful brother took this photograph of me working for a magazine shoot. And I really remember this day because I put that jumpsuit on and had found out that I had a miscarriage. And so I think about that every time I see that photo. And like that's yeah, the power of how your body navigates the system. And like a lot of things like spur interest in mine and how it really connects to my work. So thinking about how on a random trip to Shanghai, I went to the Shanghai Propaganda Poster Art Museum. It's in the bottom of an apartment complex, not archival at all. It was so hot and humid. And I loved these nationalist posters celebrating unity and like pride in the country. And then there's a small section featuring women, which I felt was really rare. And also the ones with women were the only ones you couldn't buy replicas of. But I loved this poster of this woman front and center holding a prescription and a bottle of birth control pills. And it was about family planning. And like in this like idea of socialized medicine in a communist country, here it was encouraging women to have later pregnancies, longer intervals between children, and have fewer. And it was a way to empower them to make choices in their life. But we really know culturally that's not wasn't forward in that it still advocated for a one-child policy, which has created a huge gender imbalance within China. But I found this so funny that look, because you did family planning, you can go sightseeing, you can read more, you can fly kites, you can do welding and dancing and playing music, as though these opened up options and opportunities. And so I made a whole body of work about that, and I still think about like that in relation to our current political climate and like the lack of abortion, a lack of family planning options, how Planned Parenthood is so politicized and being taken away in communities that it is the only viable form of healthcare for so many. And like how really my work meets these certain moments in tw summer of 2022, I was doing a residency at the John Michael Kohler Art Center at the Kohler Factory in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. My studio shared the space of the factory floor where tubs and toilets were made. I make a joke that there are really two older men in their 60s plus who make all the urinals in the United States. And so I went there to make work about my grandmothers, two amazing women who really made America through their labor in manufacturing. In my Chinese grandma worked for sewing for Kmart, and then my Irish American grandmother was one of the first few women to work the assembly line of an automotive plant. And so my megaphones are really to shout and tell their stories about how women contributed to making America. But I was there the day when I checked my phone, and here the Supreme Court had taken away Roe versus Wade, the law that guaranteed our rights to body autonomy and the access and right to abortion. And so I think a lot about that residency. This piece is donated as part of the residency. You donate a piece. It's donated to their collection that says Roe is precedent, and they lied under oath. When I saw that news, I cried and really realized I was the only woman on the factory floor at that time. And so one day, when someone researches the archive of what artists came through Kohler, who made what, or even my work, I want people to know that my body was in this all-male space. And I was crying, and I felt like I had no one to talk to, no one to confide in. And I felt like my tears expressed this extreme fear. And I still live with this extreme fear. And that I think too of like all the things that we carry. I lived in San Antonio, Texas for 15 years, and in those 15 years, I experienced three miscarriages in three different Texas state abortion ban timelines. And I, for someone who so wanted a pregnancy, a viable pregnancy and a baby, I think about I was making babies at this time too. In this series, My Neck, My Back. These are based off of Chinese export wares of historical objects. They are porcelain neck pillows where women of a certain stature and status in the world would sleep an uncomfortable night's rest to protect their hairstyle. And so my version of them is I pile them high with all the things we're holding on to and we have to carry as we move forward. And like, what are the protective spaces we create for each other, and how do we have these conversations? I made Babe Cave my version of a man cave because I don't think men need protective spaces in the home. I really think domestic spaces should be that of shared labor. And ironically, I read something that said the only way women get 50-50 equal care in a home is when there's divorce, and when that becomes shared labor of child rearing. So Babe Cave is my blue synthetic hair curtain, and I thought a lot about this, and it's really kind of too what informed the piece for Clay is Care, and that when you enter into this space, there is a porcelain blue and white table, and we often associate porcelain with delicate, fragile things, but here it can also be a really thick porcelain table, and I really think about the visual iconography and vocabulary I'm creating in my work. And like how that can tell a story and the power of these images. And I've been collecting affirmations since 2019 too, so I will always take your affirmations. And like this idea to let go of preciousness, which I often find is really hard with clay people to do because you tend to sometimes keep everything you make. There will be pain, which is what goes through my head every day. um, Girl, You Can and Truth Before Flowers. Please give me the real things before you celebrate me. And what I love about this installation is when it was up, I would get so many sweet pictures of little girls playing with their Barbies in there. And I love that this becomes a really big decorative object to have these like important conversations over. And so when Jennifer, this was like all kind of rolling around in my head when I was thinking about Barely Showing and then For Clay is Care. I knew I wanted to go back to Jindajian China. I had been trying to go back since 2020, but the pandemic and then just trying to navigate COVID and like the time to go was I finally went in summer of 2024 to do my dream trip to research hair factories and hair markets. But I knew I had this exhibition coming up and I knew I wanted to work with big shards. I already knew about the big pot factories that throw large ceramic pots in sections and stack them to create pots taller than people. And one thing I really loved about them is when you see them cracked or broken, they are so thick. Much different than a broken teacup. They feel so much like the body. They feel like slabs. I think about like the slabs of meat at the grocery store. And we found a factory that would let me go through their garbage pile. And it's really hard for them to throw these away too, because they also suffer from the let go of preciousness because it takes so much labor, multiple people, and time to make them, paint them, glaze them, fire them, that often they spend a lot of time repairing them. But this was a pile they let me dig through. So I dug through this local community's trash pile of pots and household trash to get them. And I just, you can see my hand is referenced for this really thick one that was broken, and then another large broken pot that I got that I did break up later with a hammer, which was really hard. It was hard to even break with a hammer. And so thinking about how the weight, heaviness, the sharpness of these, I thought the sharpness of these broken shards, the way it pierced a mattress or something soft like foam reminded me of all the times I gave myself shots during IVF, is when that needle pierces the skin. There's that like tension of when it almost enters and that fear. And there's something about these large shards that also feel really fearful. I have a collection of Chinese ceramic saggers, and so these have been floating around in my head for a long time. They are the rough outside protective houses for delicate porcelain pieces that rest on the inside that are meant to protect them in the kiln from debris flying around to help keep their shape. I have so many that are collapsed and broken that I love. And on one trip to China, someone explained to me that the sagger is also called the mother and child. And so that also kind of informed this installation as well. And so then when Jennifer said too in early this year, we'd love to come and do a studio visit. I don't want to come to Phoenix when it's too hot. I also had to be like, oh, okay, sorry, just to let you know I'm pregnant, which I share so much about my life and practice, but this was the one thing I really kept really private until like 32 weeks. My students and immediate friends and family knew because like I walked around, it was so obvious. But something I kept really private because after experiencing three miscarriages, there is that like that fear of telling people, and then I had this extreme anxiety of having to untell people. And so I really appreciated having this private time to be with myself in this body and get to know this thing that was growing inside of me, which still feels so alien. Um, so so much of my idea for this installation kept changing because also I kind of was in this like really weird space of denial that I was pregnant and this, and by 32 weeks I felt better that it was uh this baby could survive outside my body if something were to happen. But also I so appreciated Jennifer and Nicole this flexibility to kind of like go with it and like figure out um what this installation means as like I'm on the other side of it, which I also have to acknowledge that I was so often the sad friend. You know, there's that silent sisterhood where you bond because you experience these losses, but the minute a friend becomes pregnant, they're on the other side and you kind of lose them for a bit. And then many times I had friends say, I just can't talk about this sad thing anymore. And so then it just becomes really a lot. It's lonely, but even more lonely. Um, and so then this is how Barely Showing came about. It is my kind of really gentle white space that really feels like a hospital waiting room space. I think about the partitions that give you some privacy, but really you can hear everything going along in that space too. There are two mattress-sized cribs in the space on these bed frames that encourage you to come in and sit and lay down. And they're small because I hope that when you sit or lay down, you curl up almost in a fetal position and look at the bed next to you. On that other bed, there is a sagger modeled on top of a pregnancy body form. Underneath the bed are the broken blue and white shards from the big pot factory. And I really think that represents all the brokenness, the sadness, and experiences of my body that I just kind of kept shoving and burying deep below. And I really know that I had to do that to be able to navigate this pregnancy. And that the on the ends of the curtain are porcelain beads adorned with affirmations, and I so love that the affirmations come from people at the clay studio because they are now stewards and caretakers of this installation. They have to check on the hair, brush it every once in a while, make sure the static is tamed down, maybe wash the bed sheets every once in a while because there's a reason why they're white, and white in Chinese is a color of mourning. But also, I think of whiteness, the way it blankets everything. It's like when there's the first snow of a season, it kind of creates just like stillness and peacefulness. And so I really hope and encourage everyone to sit in that space. I know during installation when I was working in it, I sat in that space and fell asleep and took a nap. There's this like just beautiful light that comes from the window. And there's something about being in this like synthetic hair space. It's a connection to the body, and so in many ways that feels visceral, but a once removed of it. Um, and it feels like kind of this like gentle ghost that just kind of hovers in the middle of the installation, kind of inviting you in. So, um, the title barely showing comes from a phrase that many pregnant people have heard. It's that like celebration of joy of like you're pregnant, but congrats, you're still tiny, which is such just like being pregnant, your body is political. You walk into spaces and it instantly becomes politicized, but also it becomes a site for unwanted and unwarranted questions and comments. And so I really thought about barely showing in that context, but also barely showing in terms of like your grief, how so often we're taught to like move on, bury it, keep going. And so it also acknowledges the grief that we all carry every day as we navigate whatever situation we are in. So, thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jennifer. That was amazing. I would love if someone else has questions, please, raise your hand or indicate. I have lots of other things I can ask you about.
Yeah.
So maybe when we're waiting for anyone else to have a question, I'll just jump in, but I don't want to hold anyone else back. I've talked to Jennifer a lot. I could talk to her for
Yeah.
hours and hours, but I want other people to have the chance to. Um, I just want to first thank you for crying in front of us.
Oh, I often, I process it so much that I often am amazed at how sometimes it still startles me.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it is. I feel it's a privilege when someone cries in front of me personally, and to do it in a group setting is even more brave. And I absolutely see all of your work is very brave.
Mm.
I think that having shared an aspect of the same kind of experience with you, the fact that you talked about it in public was really empowering to me. And I feel very strongly, like, as you were saying, that we talk about it a lot when it's happening to us. Some people can't handle it. Other people, like, yes, when then they get pregnant, you lose them for a bit, or maybe you have to pull back because you like I had to stop being as close to some people for a bit while I was going through it
Yeah.
because it just was too painful. And giving people an opportunity to have a safe space to sit and be connected, even just through the object, to someone else who's going through it is just a really powerful and important experience. I have some small questions about your story that I'm so interested in. Like, what was it about the care in Poland that you felt you said you wouldn't have gotten the same level of care in the US? Did you feel like they were more willing? Yeah, explain what you meant by that.
Yeah, I think when I came home and I told everyone what happened, they said what happened to me would have been in and out in a day. Surgery kicked out, go home, good luck. 5 days was really long in the hospital. Also, yeah, really, it goes back to like socialized medicine versus, and that 5 days in the hospital with emergency surgery was
Mm,
1,200 US dollars. If that happened here in the US, I would be bankrupt. It would have been easily over 100,000.
yeah.
I think looking back on that experience, I can see it as like a really horrific comedy movie and just like the things that happened along the way. Um, but when you're in pain and you have no choices, it's all that it is what it is. I um I found moments that were extremely funny, especially like every morning when I laid there and I'd hear the doctors like critique like where I was
Figure out
from
what,
and like
yeah.
what I look like. And then I would hear them say, but her last name is Datchuk and it's Polish, so we don't understand. Um, it's amazing how 5 days in a hospital, Polish hospital too, I learned like random Polish
Yeah.
to get by. I think so in that sense, but like I remember too, they finally discharged me early and they were like, it's probably cheaper for you to stay in a hotel. And I was actually like, it's cheaper for me actually to stay in the hospital after learning how cheap it was. But I went to an Airbnb and Paulina, the Airbnb host, came to check on me and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I explained what happened. She's like, "I had the same thing happen and I went dancing later in the week." And I was like, "I am not a tough Polish woman." Um, but I think this is where there are just aspects of kindness in the world. And then like she helped get my husband to me. And then she helped me get my medical papers translated. She helped me take care of the bill. Like it was just kind of yeah, this like really it really was a life-defining experience. And I really think about um it is like my most epic story to tell. I gave you like the really quick 5 note minute version of it, but yeah, I
Yeah.
lived and I'm okay. Everyone's always like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that happened to you." I'm like I'm good.
Yeah. Well, and you found care in a country that wasn't your own, where you didn't speak the
Yeah.
language. And it sounds like the overarching thing is they took care of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and like you think about what would have happened to a Polish person if they were in the US, and like you said, they would, what would have
Mhm.
happened? Would they have been bankrupt? Would people have been, the what would have happened in the
Yeah.
hospital?
Mhm.
Um, Heidi has her hand up, so go ahead, Heidi.
Thanks. I'm sure you have, oh, I don't know how to take it down. Anyway, um, thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable. I just wanted to pick up on something else you said uh, um, about, the sort of Western societies. I mean, you didn't say these words, but I'm inflecting, Western societies sort of impetus to erase pain, chin up, carry on, move forward. And I am someone who lives with, chronic invisible disability. And I don't mind sharing in this group of people in this context that it's excruciatingly painful kidney disease, and that I have passed hundreds and hundreds of kidney stones in my life.
Mm.
Um, and so I know this this sort of I guess you even and I thought it was particularly vulnerable of you to say that, even your close friends, like I experienced that too. Even my closest friends can sometimes mock me and say, "Oh, was Heidi actually going to be able to get through 10 minutes in a conversation without talking about her health?"
Yeah.
And it's like, and yet I don't, I mean, I very different experience, very different context, but I mean, I spent 20 years in the closet, not saying anything to anyone because I felt, I don't know what I don't actually know why. I think shame or I don't know, but I spent
Yeah.
years.
I'm
That
so
was,
sorry. And like I think too there's also like the cultural context of like I grew up with this idea of you eat bitterness. You
hmm
swallow your suffering to just like keep moving forward. And
yeah.
like I think too, I never heard my elders complain about anything.
hmm
So I think of like the certain point we live with such extreme privilege. I think thinking about like how what my family had to do to become American citizens. So like it feels like I can't complain about this stuff, but I also think the world minimizes women's pain. We're
Yeah.
not, yeah.
And so I guess my question or my point to you is around, I mean, clearly your work is political and you're an activist. And I'm just wondering if what you're hoping to do is shift that in kind of Western society is like to make people think about, whoa, you know, how am I treating the people around me?
Oh, for sure. I think about this all the time, and maybe I it keeps me up at night, but I think as someone who also teaches, I want to believe that art has the power to change the world. But I also think I maybe really think it really is a call to action. So I think about like this conversation here will maybe empower someone to be more public or open and like advocate for more in their spaces in their communities. And then really think the real kind of like action in this comes from I have so many young students that like openly share about their experiences with their body and have are now armed to advocate for themselves better. And so this is where I see like the tiny ripples that become the bigger things that hopefully change. I
Mhm.
think I had to kind of work backwards. I can't start from the big idea of like the whole world. I really had to start thinking about the ripples within my own community and who I directly talk to and interact with daily.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I felt like such hope, but really, I also feel such dread and doom at our current political state. So this is where we have power in this setting, and we can feel like we're changing. I also make this joke that sometimes I wish I just made abstract expressionism pots and like this doesn't like slight pots. I love pots, but I also choose to make work about this. And I really think it comes from this cultural upbringing of like not being allowed to talk about a lot of things. But I
Yeah.
also know within my own family history that there were uh, ancestors who did take on like big power in political systems, and they did it in their own ways of teaching or being journalists and writing. And like, I still believe there's power in being a teacher and a journalist and being an artist and like ways to communicate intention and care throughout the world. So, I'm
Thank
not, yeah, thank you. I'm not going to change, but also I see that in you too, and the communities
Oh,
you care for. So,
thanks.
mm,
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think I was thinking the other day when I was with some other artists that the the artists who are making this work that other people can see themselves in, you're a super communicator. So you were saying like a journalist or a teacher, and you said communicator, like it's about storytelling, it's about um and communicating is connecting with other humans. So we're that's I so believe in everything you just said. I know there's other questions, but one thing that I wanted to just ask, and I know this is like a giant question, or so maybe you can answer it quickly, so we can go on to other people's, but you talked about the history of ceramics and the history of blue and white, but I haven't heard you really dig in at this setting, at least into like why clay is the material that you are using. And like, is there anything about the materiality of physically working with it in all its stages that aligns with your storytelling?
yeah, I love clay, and I think um, I often say too, I'm trained traditionally in clay. I went to a really brown pot school. And um, I remember when I was first introduced to porcelain, it was almost like an exotic object. It was like this really pristine white material in this really brown, dirty, dusty studio. So it felt precious to me. But a lot of times I was taught and told that porcelain's just difficult. And I really realized, like, I had this epiphany like 2 months ago that I was like, and I tell students this all the time, but I finally, my brain clicked. Porcelain is not difficult, it's just different. It's a different sensibility, it's a different level of patience. And I really believe that I was told porcelain was difficult just the way women are often told they are difficult. And so I will not continue to feed that rhetoric that it is just different. Um, it's a different sense of touch. It's really a material of care. And for all the reason, porcelain, since it was discovered in China, I find it as a cultural bridge and connector. I love the metaphors of this whiteness, this desire for whiteness material as a metaphor for whiteness as a privileged racial class. I love that people perceive it as fragile, but it's really quite resilient. Like there are porcelain panels that go on spaceships. They do so much. So, um, yeah, I really find it is like the most amazing material. I also love clay. Just it's one of the few art materials where my fingerprint is everlasting. So, um, yeah, and I love thinking about it from the figurine that you find at a thrift store to like the raw clay you dig up. I find it interesting that Jinjiang, China doesn't have that much clay reserves, that a lot of the places I worked with in Jinjiang was getting clay from Vietnam.
Wow.
So you just have to think about the global migrations of our materials and the possibility of it. And I love the material culture of it.
Mm. Thanks. Thank you for answering that. Yeah, lovely. Okay, I'm gonna read. Danielle says, I was intrigued with Sager's called Mother and Child and protective aspects acknowledged. Any other word or translations that come to mind that felt just right, like the ghost markets you mentioned, also
Mm.
made sense with layering of stories. Um, so I think that question is, are there any other words that you came across
Oh, yeah, I
that
don't
are
know
relevant?
yet. That's the beauty of this. The mother and child reference to the Sagar I have been sitting on since like 2016. I
Yay,
just
it's in
and
our
like
gallery.
yeah, I think that's just the also um yeah, to demystify how an artist works, sometimes things just sit in my head or on my shelf for like 10 years before I it meets like this moment where like I'm like, okay, I can make work about this now. Or I have this whole other idea for Saggers, but um yeah, that's gonna I need a lot more time. Yeah, like
Very
some
rich. Yeah.
yeah, just a lot of a part of it comes from uh like this challenge of making work for this exhibition. I think when you gave it to me, I was like, oh no, I can't do this. I say that to everything. And then like I'll sleep on it. When I'm washing dishes, I'll think about it. And then like it kind of pops in my head. I'm like, okay. And then for some reason, all of a sudden I start seeing all the things that are around me. I'm like, and then they all start coming together. So um I think that's what I also really love about language. I think too, there's something so lovely about like I grew up in a Cantonese speaking household. Most of China speaks Mandarin. And no one taught me the words for porcelain or glaze or like clay things. When I learn like the translations of these things, I'm like, this is amazing. I'm like, it's like the first time I've heard it and I just like clamor and hold on to all of it and really let it marinate for a while.
Yeah. I love those words that um when you learn a new word in another language and it matches with the culture and
Yeah.
it bears out what that culture thinks is important and
Hmm.
or in the slight differences. Okay, the next one says, Jennifer, thank you for all this information and your story. Could you talk a little about your process of creating an object versus a space or enclosure and how you decide to tackle a subject using either one or the other?
Ooh, yeah. I know. I never know how to answer this question because sometimes I'm like, can I just like plug you into my brain for a second? That would somehow be easier. Well, I am an object maker, and I think sometimes that's kind of how I approach an installation is like what objects live in the space and what protective environment or what way do I need to orient the space where this object has its own special place. So yeah, it always starts with an object first, and then it all the other materials I work with, it often is informed with how I work with clay. And so I think that traditional training in ceramics has allowed me to really think about how I treat other materials. And so that's one. Um, Two is also like what space am I given to work with? I have a really small studio now, and like everything starts on this one tiny table I've had for like 15 years, and it just kind of builds and moves and gets shuffled around until I have a space I can work with. And so A lot of the installations I've done really come from something that lives in my head, and I hope it works out when I get there in person and I have that like short week to do an installation. So I kind of dream in my head all the time, so that's partially how this happens. And for someone who works in 3D, I cannot look at a gallery map and figure out how to make something. I really have to see the space. Yeah, that's like me staring at a U-Haul trying to pack it. I can't do it. But if I'm in a space and my body walks around it, I understand like, okay, this is where I need to make this special space for this object. Um, I love the hair curtains as a way to divide large spaces to create like sacred, small, and protective spaces, or the large hair curtains that divide spaces in half. And that is a very big aesthetic choice in my work. If you look at the chronology of my work, everything's usually documented with like a half or a split, and that really talks about the themes of my identity of being half or both. So I kind of try to keep those threads through and how that thread informs the aesthetics of an installation. Um, yeah, and really like the broken big shards lived in my head for a really long time. Uh, I just didn't know what it was for. So part of it is just like keeping a really great sketchbook, and I just do a lot of writing in it, and I kind of file things away. I have like a file of images on my phone of things that I thought were kind of interesting. I don't know what I'll do with them, but I'll save them for later. So stuff like that.
Do you do you ever repeat the same exact kind of hair curtain or installation, or do you feel like you have to do it in a different way every time?
I kind of have to do it in a different way every time because everyone's space is so different. And so that's really it. I've been using the same bundle of red hair since 2019. It's getting to the point where it gets trimmed so many times and combed so many times that it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So my measurements are getting off now. Um, but maybe that's where the red hair eventually has reached its peak life cycle and needs to be entombed in some way. So that might be another project with
Mm.
that. I kind of like that a lot of the hair I use, I keep reusing. So this white hair is new, so I'm kind of excited to make a whole new set of white hair curtains. But I kind of love too that I kind of cannibalize my practice. I set up the hair curtains, it lives for a while. I then braid it and take it back down and then unbraid it for another one. So um yeah, I think this type of practice has a life cycle. I think the objects change too. So yeah, every space is different. I love that in for this one, it's PVC pipes suspended from like that was also like a whole challenge and conversation, and I love that there are so many people involved to figure it out, which seems so simple, but people don't often look at the architecture above them to figure out how to hang something. So, I've learned a lot through every single one because it's been so different.
Well, yeah, thanks. It was pretty it was really fun for us, and we had, as you met, some experts. So Mark Weber was here helping us, lots of experience in installation.
He
We
was
have
so worried a Philly kid was going to run through and pull the whole thing down. I'm like, that
uh-huh.
hasn't happened yet,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, but also like if it did, I'm okay. I actually find that it's like nothing's precious, so I'm okay if that
Except the
happens.
kid.
Yes, except make sure the kid's okay. But like, yeah,
Well, that was generous of you too, but yeah, his background is in designing for kids museums, so that was a very different perspective than what we usually think about.
yeah.
There's two more questions. We don't have a lot of time left. Sharon's question, I feel a little bit like you might have already answered, but I want to read it anyway. Can you please describe your creative process from inspiration to making and how long a project typically takes? Sounds like it's sort of always
Yeah.
weaving in and out. Also, how do you decide how to present each work, especially between body attached pieces and space creating installations like the waiting room? And I'm just going to read Dana's as well, and you can
Mhm.
maybe address both of them. Can you talk about the role of humor in your work and I've heard you tell stories and you frequently use humor juxtaposed with grief. How does that come into your work?
Two great questions. So, um, how long, what is my creative process like? I, it really is kind of something I stumble upon and I'm inspired by. So, like the propaganda poster, I, right now I'm really inspired by, and this is also me. When I can't sleep, I like troll eBay looking for objects with certain keywords. I used to love walking and through thrift stores and antique stores like leisurely. I just don't have that time anymore. But also, I'm finding the antique market scene in Phoenix a little different than what I had in San Antonio, and that's partially because San Antonio had a large military population, so I'd find so many Asian objects.
Hmm.
I haven't found the right one here yet because there are military bases in Arizona. Um, Also the prices have gone up on all those things. But eBay, I love that it's an anonymous seller. There's really good images. I stumbled upon these seashells that are made for tourist markets throughout Asia that are beautiful seashells but painted with red lacquer and gold. And I'm just thinking about the worlds that shells contain. I love this fetishized object that's for a tourist commodity. There's stuff going on in there, and then how my son's name is Ocean. So there's something forming in that kind of world. Don't know yet. Um, I don't know how long a project takes. I feel really lucky that I have like a few big projects for 2027, which is wild to think that far. But one's a Asian museum, the Crow Museum of Asian Art in Dallas, and yeah, I have like a pretty good budget, so I'm trying to dream big and then see what I need to pare down. So partly it's like throwing it all out there and seeing what I can do with that. I would love to do my dream installation of this room full of mirrors, like the scene in Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, and that very much might happen. So, and I want these mirrored pedestals with these objects that look like they're like kind of moving or falling. So I don't know. That's kind of where that's going. Um, Hi Dana, so nice to see you. I think Dana, I love your question. I hope that people find me funny, and I think part of like how I think humor is so important in the times of darkness that it really unites us. It gives us a second to laugh and pause and find joy in these moments. And I think it's also important how we share stories and relate to one another. How that comes into my work is that I kind of need to find humor in these things. Um, I think I sit so much in my head and like with these experiences too with my body that making allows me to move my body and I have to find some humor in that we all are given the same vessel. What has happened to it and how we treat it is all different. And yeah, I don't yeah, I think partly I listen to a lot of comedians and comedy shows while I work, and partly why I do that is it really taught me how to tell a story.
Mm.
And so I find a lot of inspiration in that. Um, and like even a side tangent to that, it's really hard to find comedians that don't tell the same raunchy, um, kind of inappropriate, sexist, misogynist jokes. Like so, like I think you have to work even harder to find humor. I love This American Life. I love a good thematic storytelling session. Um, so. I think ultimately why I wanted to be an artist was to find a way to tell a visual story and allow me the space and time to talk about it.
Mm. And that's a great way to end.
Yeah.
Hopefully, there's space and time to talk about it. I hope you felt like this hour has given you a little space and time. We are very privileged to have gotten to listen to your thoughts and your ideas and see your images. You inspire me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. I am like almost 7 months postpartum, and I feel like my brain is finally firing in the way I want it to. So, like, thank you for listening to me ramble on and I hope you can visit Clay's Care. It's a really beautiful and touching exhibition. And yeah, thank you, Jennifer, for the opportunity and for the Clay Studio for being really beautiful stewards of that majestic white hair space.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And we also just have to make a shout out to your cat.
Yes, she's been asleep on the bed over here, conked out. My
We
cat
were
is a Shoji Hamada kitty. I misgendered her. She's a girl, but she has Shoji Hamada energy.
well, and you intentionally made sure we could see her in the image, and to me,
Yeah.
that's offering some rest and care because she's been
Yeah.
napping this whole time. So,
Yeah. Well,
okay,
thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Yeah. Have
Have
a
a
lovely
great
day.
day. Bye, everybody.
Bye.